Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Kyle Abbott had spent weeks trying to convince himself that the worst was over, that the storm of distrust, manipulation, and retaliation surrounding Claire Newman had finally calmed enough for him to breathe again. But in true Genoa City fashion, peace never lasted, and Kyle was about to make a mistake so catastrophic, so loaded with Newman-level consequences, that even Jack Abbott wouldn't be able to shield him from the fallout. Kyle had barely allowed himself to savor Claire's Thanksgiving kiss, that gentle, trembling moment when Claire pulled him close and reminded him that she still felt something, still saw something, in him. It was the kind of spark that could have ignited a full reunion, but Kyle was so blinded by that hope he didn't see the trap he was walking into. Because the minute he promised himself he'd take things slow, avoid pressure, and respect Claire's boundaries, Victor Newman's shadow tightened around him once again. For months, Victor had been unreasonably hard on Kyle, borderline vindictive, even during the early Claire-Kyle relationship. Kyle never forgot the intense scrutiny, the subtle threats, the way Victor enlisted Audra Charles to help break them up. It felt like a test, a psychological pressure cooker designed to push Kyle to his breaking point. And still, somehow, Kyle had passed. Victor eventually softened, if Victor Newman could ever be described as soft. He acted like Kyle had proven himself, proven he wasn't just Jack Abbott's son, but a man who genuinely loved and protected Claire Newman. Even now, Victor didn't openly oppose the idea of Kyle and Claire reuniting. He didn't love it, but he didn't fight it. And for Victor Newman, that was practically a blessing. But all that goodwill, all that fragile understanding, was about to be shattered, because while Victor was neck-deep in the Matt Clark, aka Mitch Bacall, crisis exploding in Los Angeles, Kyle Abbott was gearing up to make a move that could destroy everything. It all started innocently enough. Diane Jenkins Abbott approached Kyle with an idea, a risky, dangerous, Abbott-style maneuver that felt like something straight out of Jack's playbook, blended with Diane's flair for scheming. Diane wanted intel. Dirt. Leverage against Victor Newman, something the Abbotts could use as a shield or a sword depending on how this looming war escalated. And Kyle, still desperate to prove himself useful to his family after months of turmoil, agreed. He didn't just agree, he committed, fully and completely. Diane and Kyle teamed up behind closed doors, whispering in shadows, piecing together a dirt-digging operation that could shift the balance of power. They planned to investigate Victor's movements, to identify weaknesses in the Newman operation while Victor was distracted with Matt Clark's LA chaos. If they could return to Jack with actionable intel, they could give the Abbotts a rare upper hand, or at least, that's how Kyle justified it. What Kyle failed to consider, what Diane conveniently glossed over, was that Victor Newman always found out. He always uncovered the motives, the players, the traitors. And when he did, he didn't forgive. Kyle was essentially stepping back into the fire pit he had just crawled out of months earlier. Because while Victor might defend Kyle's love for Claire today, that tolerance was conditional, fragile. One betrayal, one sign of Abbott behavior creeping into Kyle's bloodstream, and Victor would pull the plug on Kyle's future with Claire without hesitation. And what Kyle didn't realize was that this scheme wasn't just risky, it was fatal. Fatal to his relationship, fatal to his standing with Victor, fatal to any future where he and Claire reunited without Newman interference. As Diane and Kyle dug deeper, as they pieced together information that could indeed give Jack a chance to ambush Victor, Kyle started to feel a shift. A thrill. A sense of power. The rush that came from doing something bold, something meaningful, something that reminded him he was an Abbott. But with every step, he wandered closer to the one line Victor had silently drawn: do not betray me. Do not undermine me. Do not threaten me. And yet, unknowingly, that's exactly what Kyle was about to do. Because if their plan went wrong, if their dirt digging got exposed, Victor wouldn't just be irritated. He would unleash his full fury, the same fury that had crushed corporate rivals, destroyed enemies, and exiled people he once called family. Meanwhile, Claire Newman was trying to navigate her own emotional battlefield. She still loved Kyle, she couldn't deny that, but trauma had rewired her heart, making her cautious, hesitant, afraid of being pulled into another emotional tug-of-war between the Abbotts and the Newmans. Her Thanksgiving kiss wasn't a promise, it was a whisper of possibility. A door cracked open, but not fully. Claire wasn't ready for pressure, chaos, or conflict. Most of all, she wasn't ready for drama involving her grandfather. And Kyle playing spy against Victor Newman? That was the ultimate crime. The ultimate deal-breaker. If Claire found out Kyle was sabotaging Victor, especially while Victor was dealing with the Matt Clark threat, she would feel deceived, cornered, and furious. It would trigger the same self-protection instinct she'd used her whole life. But the real turning point, the moment that could doom everything, would come when Victor finally returned home from LA. If he walked into more drama, more tension, more evidence that Jack and Diane had been plotting behind his back with Kyle as an accomplice, he wouldn't stay neutral. He wouldn't shrug it off. Victor would go on the attack. And Kyle? He'd be the first target. Victor already saw shades of Jack in Kyle, the impulsiveness, the defiance, the loyalty to the Abbott cause. One exposed dirt-digging mission, and Victor would declare Kyle an enemy, not a potential grandson-in-law. And once Victor turned against Kyle again, he'd have no problem stepping between him and Claire. He'd interfere. He'd manipulate. He'd forbid. He'd sabotage. Claire would feel obligated to listen, not because Victor controlled her life, but because she owed him gratitude, loyalty, and trust after everything she'd endured and survived. And when Victor intervened, Claire would fold. She would back away from Kyle for good. Because loving Kyle had already hurt her once. Loving Kyle while he was at war with her grandfather? That was a complication she couldn't survive emotionally. Victor's disapproval would plant seeds of doubt, seeds that Diane and Kyle's reckless plan had watered into a full-grown disaster. Kyle would try to explain, of course. He'd try to apologize, to justify, to claim he was doing everything to protect his family and not to harm hers. But Claire wouldn't hear it. If Victor declared Kyle a threat, Claire's reunion hopes would evaporate. Her trust would collapse. Her heart would turn cold, not from lack of love, but from self-preservation. And the worst part? Victor could, and likely would, use the destructive AI program now in his possession to crush the Abbotts' attempted ambush. That technology, that weapon, was his ace. No matter how clever Kyle and Diane were, they were playing with matches while Victor held a flamethrower. Kyle's plan wouldn't just fail, it would backfire spectacularly. By the end of this brewing war, Kyle Abbott might not just lose his chance at reuniting with Claire, he might lose her entirely, not because of lack of love, but because of a single catastrophic choice. A dirt-digging mistake. A Victor Newman blunder that could define his future. And when the dust settled, Kyle would realize too late that protecting his family had cost him the woman he still loved, because you cannot play spy against Victor Newman and expect him to bless your romance with his granddaughter. In Genoa City, love may conquer many things, but Victor's wrath is never one of them. Kyle's mistake dooms Claire reunion with this Victor blunder? Kyle Abbott will make a dirt-digger mistake. Will Kyle doom his Claire Newman reunion with a major Victor Newman blunder? Victor was ridiculously hard on Kyle when he was still a couple with Claire. Victor worked to break Kyle and Claire up with Audra Charles's help, but he ultimately came around and acted like Kyle passed his test. Although Victor will never be thrilled about Kyle's Abbott status, he's still been defending Kyle's love for Claire. Victor supposedly isn't against the idea of Kyle and Claire reuniting, but that could change in the not-too-distant future. Claire pulled Kyle into a kiss after spending Thanksgiving with his family, so he's got some renewed hope for another chapter together. Kyle will have to proceed with caution and avoid pressuring Claire, but he has good reasons to think a reunion is still possible. However, the Young and the Restless spoilers say Kyle will team up with Diane Jenkins Abbott on a risky project during the week of December 1st to 5th. It turns out Diane and Kyle will put their heads together on a dirt-digging operation. Kyle and Diane will do some investigating as they try to get the upper hand on Victor, who'll be busy dealing with Matt Clark aka Mitch Bacall drama in Los Angeles. That'll give Diane and Kyle a chance to help Jack Abbott perhaps plot a Newman ambush. If all goes well, Victor could come home to more drama and lash out as a result. If Kyle's dirt-digging efforts get exposed, Victor may turn against him all over again and consider him just like his father. Victor loathes Jack with a burning passion and could feel the same way about Kyle if he plays a role in helping the Abbotts gain an advantage. Naturally, that potential advantage won't last for long. Since Victor is in possession of a highly destructive AI program and has a knack for coming out on top, he's bound to emerge victorious in this fight. As for Kyle, he may land on Victor's bad side once more thanks to his involvement in the Abbott-Newman feud. Kyle could push Victor too far and sink his chances of a Claire reunion if Victor decides to intervene. The terrifying truth about Kyle's situation, and the one no one dared to say aloud, was that he wasn't just making a misstep. He was crafting a catastrophe with every decision he made beside Diane, every secretive meeting, every whispered update. He was unknowingly constructing the very weapon Victor Newman would later use to destroy him. And what made it worse was that Kyle kept telling himself he was being smart, calculated, and careful, when in reality, he was operating from pure emotion that blinded him to the trap he was walking into. A part of Kyle still lived in the shadow of Jack Abbott's legacy, desperate to prove he could rise to the same cunning, the same fearlessness, the same strategic brilliance that defined generations of Abbotts. But Kyle was not Jack. Kyle was still emotionally raw from heartbreak, from betrayal, from the wounds of a relationship with Claire that never had the chance to grow organically without Newman influence crushing it at every turn. His desire to prove he belonged beside the heavyweights, Jack, Victor, even Diane, was morphing into recklessness. And that recklessness was about to cost him everything. Diane, on the other hand, was operating from her own motives, half loyalty, half fear, half ego. Diane's marriage to Jack may have given her a new title, a new seat at the Abbott table, but she was painfully aware that her past always threatened to swallow her whole. Aligning herself with Kyle on this mission allowed her to feel useful, indispensable, an asset instead of a liability. Jack trusted her, but only to a point. Helping him gain leverage against Victor would cement her place in the Abbott family, strengthening her position in a way nothing else could. She needed this. And unfortunately for Kyle, Diane's self-preservation often outweighed her empathy. She didn't stop long enough to ask herself if involving her son who was still aching from a failed romance with Claire, was the right thing to do. She saw opportunity. She saw a chance to rise higher. And she dragged Kyle into the middle of it. Meanwhile, Jack Abbott stood in the background, seeing only the tactical advantage this dirt digging could give him. With Victor focusing all his firepower on the Matt Clark situation in Los Angeles, the Abbotts finally had breathing room, a rare window where Victor's attention wasn't suffocating them. To Jack, using that distraction to the Abbott family's benefit wasn't just smart, it was necessary. The decades-long Abbott-Newman rivalry had taught him to take openings where he found them. The problem was, Jack didn't fully realize how much Kyle's heart remained tangled with Claire. He didn't understand that Kyle wasn't operating from a strategic mindset, but an emotional one. Jack saw Kyle as an Abbott soldier, a capable son ready to join ranks. But Kyle was simultaneously the soldier and the sacrifice, and no one was noticing the tremor in his hands as he prepared to take action. While the Abbotts moved their chess pieces, Victor Newman was fighting a battle of his own in Los Angeles. Matt Clark, now operating under the alias Mitch Bacall, was becoming a thorn in Victor's side in ways no one could have predicted. It was more than business. It was personal. And Victor's instinct when personally threatened was always the same: retaliate, dominate, and extinguish the threat entirely. But the very intensity of Victor's focus on the Matt Clark drama created exactly the environment the Abbotts were hoping for. As Victor put out fires in LA, the Abbotts began quietly stacking kindling in Genoa City. They were ready to light a match the second the opportunity presented itself. But fate has a way of revealing every secret, every betrayal, every hidden scheme in the most brutal way possible. And in this case, the exposure was not only inevitable, it was explosive. It began when one of Victor's security operatives picked up unusual digital movements tied to Abbott servers, encrypted searches, unusual login patterns, scrambled data paths. Victor's people didn't know who was behind it yet, but they knew someone was watching Victor's operations with calculated interest. And the minute Victor became suspicious, the dominoes started to tip. Victor's genius-level AI program amplified his surveillance abilities tenfold, detecting threads no ordinary investigator could track. The very technology Victor guarded so fiercely, the one he had used strategically to protect Newman Enterprises, was now pointing him straight toward the Abbotts. Straight toward Diane. Straight toward Kyle. Before Victor even returned from Los Angeles, he had enough data to know the Abbotts were plotting. But he didn't yet know the extent of Kyle's involvement. He only knew something smelled like Jack Abbott's brand of retaliation, and where Jack was involved, betrayal was never far behind. Victor vowed to confront the Abbotts the moment he returned home. And that moment was coming sooner than anyone expected. Back in Genoa City, Claire Newman was walking a tightrope of conflicting emotions. Her Thanksgiving kiss with Kyle still lingered on her lips, warm, comforting, painfully familiar. Kyle was the first person she allowed herself to be vulnerable with after her traumatic upbringing and manipulation under Jordan's control. He was her anchor, her grounding point, her proof that love didn't have to be toxic or transactional. But Claire's trauma had carved deep scars into her psyche. She didn't trust easily. She didn't forgive easily. And above all else, she didn't want to be caught in the middle of another family war. The Newmans had nearly suffocated her in the past, and the Abbotts had never been neutral in the Newman world. If Kyle was dragging himself back into the Abbott-Newman battlefield, Claire knew the emotional shrapnel would devastate her again. Claire sensed something was shifting even before the truth hit. Kyle was distracted in recent days, torn, fidgety, nervous. When she asked if something was wrong, he insisted everything was fine. But Claire had learned to spot a lie. And Kyle's lies were the kind that came from fear, not malice. She didn't push him. She didn't demand answers. Instead, she silently retreated, feeling her hope dissolve. Claire wanted a reunion. She wanted Kyle back. But she wasn't delusional. Kyle was an Abbott, raised in a world where family loyalty came before everything. If he was involved in something against Victor, against her family, Claire knew she couldn't follow him down that path. She refused to lose herself again. And then came the moment everything detonated. Victor Newman returned to Genoa City with the fury of a storm at his back, armed with AI-verified proof that the Abbotts had been digging for dirt. Jack tried to spin it, Diane tried to smooth it, but Victor was no fool. He knew exactly what had happened. Kyle was confronted last, not because Victor didn't suspect him, but because Victor wanted to give him the opportunity to deny it. Wanted to see if Kyle had the spine to tell the truth, or the cowardice to hide behind Jack and Diane. Kyle stood in Victor's office, hands trembling, trying to defend himself while Victor's icy glare cut into him like a blade. And then came the line that sealed Kyle's fate. Victor leaned in, voice low, dangerous, final. "You're your father's son after all." The sentence hit Kyle like a death blow. Victor didn't just see him as an Abbott, he saw him as a threat. A betrayer. A snake. A repeat of Jack. And when Victor declared someone a threat, that declaration never came without consequences. Claire heard about the confrontation within hours. The rumor spread like wildfire across Newman Towers. And the second Claire learned the truth, that Kyle had been secretly digging into Victor's affairs while pretending everything was fine, her heart snapped. She felt manipulated. Blindsided. Lied to. Even if Kyle had done it to help his family, even if he hadn't meant to hurt her, Claire couldn't ignore the parallels to her past. Secrets had defined her trauma. Betrayal had defined her healing. She could not, would not, invite that kind of instability back into her life. When Claire confronted Kyle, her voice shook, not with anger, but with devastation. She asked him one question, and one question only. "Did you think about me at all when you made this decision?" Kyle froze. Because the honest answer, the one he couldn't say aloud, was complicated. Yes, he thought about her. But he also thought about the Abbotts. About proving himself. About being worthy. And that hesitation? That moment of silence? Claire interpreted it exactly as Victor hoped she would.